Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you could reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine. Give us a thumbs up if you're in there now. You could also subscribe to our daily newsletters. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. But before we jump into our first story, Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm good. There's some fall seasons in the air, kind of feeling the crispness this morning, which is awesome. Also, David, I have to say I am highly impressed. The teleprompter was down and you just crushed that opening. That was well done.
I never have the intro on the prompter.
That was well done. Usually there's a little bit of...
Oh yeah, no, I don't get me wrong. Like, I rely on my own abilities, but I still seem to mess it up every week at some point.
Okay.
No agency this week.
Nailed it.
No agency.
Good work.
No, but you're right about the crisp air. Like, replayed under, let's say, fall conditions yesterday.
Great. Yeah, it was awesome.
It felt nice. Yeah, didn't feel like I was dying from heat stroke. Anna, how you doing this week?
Doing great.
Doing great.
I'm also appreciating the fall air.
Yeah.
Thought it was gonna be summer forever.
Did you get your summer bucket list all knocked out last weekend?
It was so hot last weekend that it just sapped me of my need to even do that. I think I was just like, you know what? See ya. See ya, summer.
Yeah, indoors it is. And Jeff, you didn't suffer any head trauma before the podcast this week.
No, I have no excuse for any incoherent remarks. It's just all me this time.
Very good. Well, before we jump into our babblings and incoherent rants, we have a word from our sponsor. This week's episode is brought to you by SIGA Technologies. While it has always been at the forefront, more manufacturers are giving even more attention to how maintenance programs can drive greater efficiency and productivity. Register now to watch Jeff's new interview with Stephen Timms, SIGA CEO, to hear how manufacturers are increasing tool time 2 hours per day per technician. Jeff, I know that we get new people that give us positive feedback and register every week for this, but do you plan on talking to Stephen at SIGA for a possible follow-up, given the success of this one?
Potentially. It's a key topic. It's something that we continue to need to address and find new solutions for in terms of getting the absolute most out of our workforce and using all the tools that we have available to us to do so. So definitely something we'll stay in tabs on.
All right. Well, click on the link below in the description, either in the live chat, or we'll also have that in the body copy so you can access that exclusive new Q&A. All right. Our first most popular story this week. Nissan is making portable power sources from old Leaf batteries. The Leaf has fallen and faded. Alas, its legend lives on. Batteries from old Nissan Leaf EVs are getting a new lease on life as portable power sources. They can be used to run small devices or even deliver emergency power in disasters. Nissan Motor sold more than 650,000 Leaf EVs, and the batteries often retain a charging capacity longer than the car's lifespan. So, Nissan partnered with JVC Kenwood and 4R Energy to make 32-pound power sources that sell for about $1,100 in Japan. A Leaf has 48 battery modules in it. The portable power stations are made up of 2 modules each. When Leafs reach the end of the road, Nissan tests the batteries to reuse any that still hold a charge. Apparently, when a battery's charge capacity dips to 80%, they aren't even usable in EVs, but could still serve other purposes. You can't buy these portable power sources yet in the US, but this could be a potential upcycling stopgap in the battery life cycle. As long as we have a need for 15.6 million portable power sources. Right, Anna? Everyone needs one.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. A strong maybe. First of all, thank you for using the word alas in your intro, William Shakespeare.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I like the idea of this battery in theory, right? I think there are some issues of usefulness, at scale.
Yeah.
But I do think that pricing will also be a major factor in whether or not this takes off. And obviously, you said that this is being sold in Japan only right now. Who knows what is in store for the U.S. market? But right now, the market for energy storage, I think maybe people are seeing this as something they might need, as like infrastructure instability is becoming more of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Increasing incidence of natural disasters, super high temperatures, stuff like that, where people are losing power unexpectedly, and maybe they need something that they can just as a plug-in or.
And this may be a little bit safer than like a gas-powered generator.
Well, right. Yeah, exactly. Anything that's electrical, you could probably store indoors. You wouldn't need to use it. There is a market for these types of power banks already, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also, there's more recreational activities where people will use these. If you want to camp or RV or whatever, and you don't have an external power source, like people use these types of devices all the time for that. All that said, these devices already exist.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not cheap, but neither is this.
No, yeah. It's like, it's a high ticket item for like a feel good purchase, and for something that to me feels like I would buy on tigerdirect.com.
Well, that's kind of where I'm at with it too, because like the difference between this and what's already on the market is that those are brand new.
Mm-hmm.
I think there could be a perception problem here with people who see this and consider that the batteries are being positioned as being past their useful life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just for auto. I know that they have other usages for other applications, but as a buyer, I think there might be a lot of assumptions that your application is next because of the condition of this device, and that it's already deteriorated to a certain point. And maybe at $1,000 a crack, you could buy something brand new. And then like, why wouldn't you? I guess, I don't know.
Yeah.
You would have to, like you said, you would have to, as a feel-good purchase, want to use a recycled product and roll the dice that it's going to work for a long time.
Yeah.
Not that you're on borrowed time already with this device that's like past its prime. The fact that it's a failing battery is sort of inherent in its pitch as a product. That might be hard to get past for some people.
Yeah.
I think it's a great idea, and it would be great if people got on board with this. I just don't know if they will.
Yeah. Jeff, I don't know if people are going to get on board with this either, because, this could be, as you like to say, something that leads to something better. But right now, that price point just seems like a real hindrance. Maybe the market is different in Japan, but I figured that of all places, this would be cheapest in Japan. That's where they're sourcing the materials from. And to Anna's point, there is a greater need for these as there are going to be more extreme weather events. But, if you're thinking about protecting your home and your family, do you pick up an item that is upcycled?
Well, I think it really does depend on the application here. I could think about this maybe for something that doesn't have a huge power suck to it, essentially. If you're looking at maybe outdoor lighting, I don't know, something along those lines, there's definitely some application. That's where the price point does come in, because is it really worth it for what to be paying for it? The thing that caught my attention, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So each Leaf, according to the article, has 48 battery modules. These stations use 2 modules.
Yeah.
So you're getting 24 of these power supplies out of each vehicle battery.
Yeah.
And you're selling them for about $1,100 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
That generates somewhere around $26,000 in revenue. A brand new Leaf costs about $28,000.
Yeah.
So when Nissan looks at this, I'd like to really feel they're being altruistic in their motives here. But aren't they kind of double dipping as well? I mean, they basically found a new revenue source here for something they've already sold once.
Yeah.
So bringing it back in, if they're capable of doing it, I guess I can appreciate the effort there. And again, there may be some applications that where this does make sense and is cost effective. But I would still rather see as a better option here recycling the materials that are being used within these power supplies and within these batteries. We know that a lot of these elements are very difficult to mine, very difficult to get at. When we look at lithium in particular, there is a very limited supply. So recycling them seems like a better option if we really want to push forward with EVs sort of reframing the paradigm of the automotive sector really around the world.
Right.
So that's where I get hung up on this a little bit. We did an article did a story last week about, it was a Kia, I believe, that was taking all that recycled plastic out of the ocean and doing some things and creating auto bodies. You'd kind of hope Nissan would do something similar here in terms of sort of supporting the supply chain, as opposed to what it feels like to me, just creating another revenue source.
Well, I mean, let's say all those batteries are good and can be repurposed. That's an $18.25 billion opportunity for Nissan.
Not too bad.
Just with Leaf batteries, you know? And I mean, the people who they've partnered with, JVC Kenwood and 4R Energy. 4R Energy is actually a joint venture that Nissan owns a stake in. So, you know, they could take a big piece of the pie if they found a way to repurpose EV batteries from competitors as well. So one thing that stood out to me too is that this seemed like a target to be something that the government would subsidize, right, Anna? Because they could subsidize this, bring the cost of them down, just so that way they're not winding up in landfills. But would you sooner see all government money go to kind of getting recyclability up and running, or could that be a potential like stopgap in terms of finding homes for some of these materials that otherwise would just kind of go to a landfill?
All the government money?
All the government money.
I don't know. That's a big question, David. There's a lot of places for it to go. But I do think this is an important issue that needs to be addressed. And I think I'm kind of with Jeff on this, where instead of focusing on this secondary market for something that is maybe too costly for it to be appealing, and then also maybe not that necessary at the scale at which that they have these materials, that maybe recycling is the better hope for this, but I know we're not there yet. So.
Yeah. I was looking into a trade show that's going to be held in Detroit next March. It's the EV Battery Recycling and Reuse Trade Show. Obviously a great fit for this story. According to this group, as EV batteries reach end of service, they're still able to store at least 70% of their original capacity, which can be repurposed for these, quote, second life energy storage uses in applications like electrical grids. That was one I didn't think of. Communication towers, as well as energy storage for solar and wind farms. But I was just thinking, like, how many of these are you going to need for, like, per turbine? You know?
True, but like if the application is more B2B and it's like a utility person who really understands the capacity and like what these can do and can't do, I feel like that's a better sell than a consumer product where already the image of it is tarnished just by the mere fact that it's a degrading battery.
Oh, completely agree. Where you're struggling to sell, or not struggling, but you're selling one-offs. You're selling two at a time. Whereas if you're selling to solar and wind farms, you might be able to unload, you know, quite a few of these. I'm sure not at maybe that $1,200 price point. Another thing that is of interest is that, so as manufacturers produce these battery packs that are becoming more complex, one of the industry's key challenges is trying to figure out what is going to be the standardization, right? Across the globe that kind of helps repurpose these batteries. Because we've seen every automaker kind of come up with their own secret sauce. And at some point, everyone's kind of got to get in line and be like, this is how we're doing it. So that way we can either reuse them or recycle them.
Well, a lot of the issues with recycling too, and you've kind of alluded to them, it's cost. Number one, it's an expensive process. It's also it's dirty from an environmental perspective. You're still dealing with some very toxic chemicals here that you do have to extract and handle and make sure you're handling them safely. So that's where a lot of those extra costs come in as well, which is why you can see why someone like Nissan would look at it as, hey, I can just take it and plug it into something else without breaking it down. It can be very appealing.
So what are we doing with these batteries in the interim? Are we just like warehousing these things until like, you know what? Recycling is going to get up and running. We have the special EV battery. Like, is that New Jersey now? We just start piling them in Jersey?
Well, actually, it's part of the issue with the people that do want to recycle them. There's not enough yet. They haven't gotten to scale, where they can really apply some of these processes that'll take some of the costs down and make it a more economically feasible venture.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just enjoying picturing New Jersey just piled with these pyramids of old batteries. It brings me joy. All right. Our next most popular story. Engineers hack voice recognition with PVC. It looks like your voice might not make the most secure passport. Digital security engineers from the University of Wisconsin-Madison have discovered weaknesses in automatic speaker identification systems that are supposed to be, quote, as secure as a fingerprint. These state-of-the-art security systems have a rather fatal flaw against novel analog attacks. The team of researchers was able to fool machine learning algorithms supporting automatic speaker identification systems by speaking through customized PVC pipes. The team got the idea after they discovered that voice ID systems didn't respond correctly if someone was talking through their hands or talking through a box for some reason, too. Just they really had to check that one out. See if it works if they're talking through a box to turn on their phone. The researchers wanted to learn if they could change frequency vibrations of a voice to beat the security system. They did so by altering the diameter and length of PVC pipes until they generated the resonance they were attempting to replicate. Eventually, the team managed to create an algorithm that could determine PVC pipe dimensions required to imitate a voice. Jeff, their algorithm defeated security systems 60% of the time. Now, I always get a kick out of sort of like these analog hacks, but this one in particular, where you're essentially watching these engineers use giant PVC slide whistles to break advanced security systems, it's just like, man, I bet they just never saw that coming.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've always been hung up on that term social engineering to describe hackers, but this is the perfect fit for it. I can't think of a better way to describe what was going on here. And it's necessary. It's part of the process. I mean, part of me was always kind of like, hey, why don't you tell these security people first before you go write the paper on what you found out how to do?
That's my favorite.
So they can fix
Here's
this a little bit.
Here's how you do it.
Yeah.
So the bad guys don't use it, but it's also part of the process. And I think it's also a demonstration. I think the headline was maybe a little bit misleading.
The headline was a little bit perfect, I think.
Because they did have to do a fair amount of machine learning on their end in terms of determining how to manipulate the PVC pipe in order to make it work. So it wasn't just like grabbing one off the shelf at Menards and going to work.
They drilled a couple of holes and, made essentially a big PVC recorder and boom, off to the races.
No problem.
Yep.
So it was a little more complicated, but I also think it speaks to a lot of some of the trends we've been talking about here. The advancements in machine learning and artificial intelligence and how they can be adapted for bad purposes, but also for good stuff. I mean, because you can look at this both ways. You can see that they basically innovated a hack for these security systems, but you can also look at the fact that they found a vulnerability that now we can provide a solution for. Or if you're using these types of systems, we either make them better or you find something else.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of positive that goes along with this too. It wasn't just pointing out the flaws, I guess, in this particular system exclusively. It was also learning how we can get better because we did identify this issue.
Yeah. Well, and Anna, as we look to improve these systems in terms of security, we think of using like our bodies to unlock our devices. And we're thinking about like fingerprint identification, face identification, retinal scans. And it seems like these are truly unique identifiers, but I mean, are still hackable.
Yeah. And I think not just that, but there's a lot of risk behind biometrics. There's a lot of ethical concerns that people have, I think, about using your body for identification, creating markers for security that you can never change about yourself. So it's not like a password where you can change that 500 times throughout the course of your life. Apple will always have your retina.
Yeah.
For, you know what I mean? So I get that there's a reason that's more secure, but I also feel like there are some downsides to that.
Yeah.
Some downsides.
Some, such as if it's designed in a certain way that it doesn't even recognize you.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of challenges there, right? We've seen that with facial recognition, right? And how prone that is to corruption, to bias. As I never really thought about this technology in use before. I know it's like we have an Alexa and I know that it can like get to know your voice and probably that's like a very basic use of what that does. But I was looking into this to see a little bit more about it, like how it's being used, how it's being studied. And It was studied for the first time systematically in 2022 to see if there was any bias in voice recognition. And this group of researchers, they were in the Netherlands, and found that this technology actually performs worse for women and for people of non-U.S. backgrounds.
Oh.
So when it comes to security, maybe less helpful for those folks. Another challenge for this technology that bears looking into, I think, because they said that the when it was built around male users that are native to the U.S. And so anyone who has an accent, anyone who has a different tone of voice or different background, they were not, that was not as secure or successful. So that's another challenge there. And you saw that obviously with facial recognition as well, that there's a lot of gaps in that, its consistency, its reliability, and its accuracy. So, I guess, if you get on board with this stuff, it's great that it's being tested for security. I was a little bit alarmed that it was this third party that was just doing this for research purposes and not the people who produce the technology. You just sort of have to hope that that's taking place elsewhere. And as Jeff always says, the hackers are always going to be one step ahead of us. The best that we can do is try to make life harder for them. Mm-hmm. And if there are people out there that are, troubleshooting, great. But this is a university team. This was not anyone affiliated with whoever produced this technology to begin with. So that's a little bit scary to me. But I think,
what's scary to you is extremely necessary to me. You need these people, particularly at a university level, who are working towards their PhDs, working on these projects that are actually kind of filling a big void in terms of troubleshooting these technologies.
Right. You misunderstand me. The void is what is concerning to me.
Gotcha.
I'm glad that they are doing this, but there's no, they're doing it on their own volition.
True. But I think that these companies, you can't think of everything. I don't know, maybe.
Well, yes and no. Yeah. Okay, you're right. You can't think of anything, and the hackers are always going to be a little bit ahead because they're not thinking about it from a positive perspective. They just want to do damage or steal information or whatever the case is. But again, we kind of fall into this really sticky spot when it comes to any type of security between understanding the vulnerability and supplying the patch, if you will. So what comes first? Before we can figure out how to fix something, we have to know how to break it.
Yeah.
And that's always the tricky spot in this. And you would ideally, there would be some sort of custom flow that we have when we find out how to break something before we release it to everybody. But at the same time, a lot of times those patches won't come out until you do expose the vulnerability and people have to respond and they're forced to respond.
Yeah.
So.
Now, isn't that a little bit more available in the tech sector? Now, don't get me wrong. My understanding of this goes back to the reference at the beginning of the story, the 1982 classic Sneakers, where don't these security firms or tech developers hire essentially hackers to try and break the box so that way they can discover these vulnerabilities before they even go to market? Or is it just the pace of consumer electronics now doesn't allow for that sort of thing?
So there's a couple different variables there. First of all, absolutely. There's ethical hackers that, as part of any type of security organization. But unfortunately, they don't always pay as well as the bad guys. Yeah. So there is competition, extreme competition for the best hackers in terms of which side of the line they're going to go on, if they're going to be a black hat or a white hat.
Yeah.
So there's always that. You also have to consider the company developing the security solution is a product development company, not a criminal. Only thing the criminal is thinking about is, how do I break it? How do I get in? How do I pick the lock? So when they can dedicate their efforts there, and and we've talked about this with the Security Breach podcast, but the way that these organizations have become so much more complex to the point where they have HR and they have marketing teams and they have customer service teams for after you get hacked. And there are certain individuals, organizations that just focus on providing access. They're not going to perform the hack. They're just going to tell you how to get in, and then they'll sell that information to somebody else. So that's why we're always chasing. And that's why there's a conflict in these types of stories, because you're glad they found it.
Yeah.
You just hope somebody else isn't using it for nefarious purposes before we can get the patch in place.
Well, and it's alarming because these systems, right, are already used to bank by phone. So it stands to reason that bad actors will go to any lengths to beat the box. I would also like to just call out, I believe her name is Shama Ahmad, who kind of came up with this idea during COVID. I don't know if you guys read that part, but so she had her aha moment, stuck in her house, and then basically, she couldn't get access to PVC pipes, so she used paper towel tubes as part of the original background before it became like a big group project. And also, we got to say, like, this is one of the biggest problems with voice identification since Seth Brundle's deteriorating condition locked him out of his teleportation prototype, right?
Not familiar with that application. David?
Sounds good. Well, I mean, it just proves that, when you have such innovation at home, sometimes things can get dangerous and you turn yourself into a half fly.
I was going to say, if you get the reference, we'll send you a koozie, but I didn't get it either.
Yeah, so. I think Alex nailed it.
Yeah.
Anyone get the sneakers at the beginning? My voice is my passport.
Sneakers, that was that old of a movie?
I think so.
I mean, it was that old. I mean, it's a great movie. I love it, but
it's a pretty youthful Redford.
Wow, 82? Man, I didn't think it was that old, though. Anyway.
As we all know, I can be wrong.
We'll have to fact check that one at the break.
All right. Our next most popular story this week. Toyota reveals cause of factory shutdown. Toyota finally got to the root cause of the car maker's plant problem. Last week, we discussed the $356 million elephant in Toyota's room after the auto giant had to shut down all 28 vehicle assembly lines at all 14 of its automotive plants in Japan. According to the company, the problem stems from a lack of memory. It's not that somebody forgot to turn the computers on, but we're talking storage space. According to The Guardian, Toyota said the stoppage on August 29th happened after, quote, insufficient disk space caused a system malfunction following a standard maintenance procedure. The automaker said, quote, data that had accumulated in the database was deleted and organized, and an error occurred during the insufficient disk space. Due to insufficient disk space, causing the system to stop, which is why you do not let your spokesperson come from IT. The data was transferred to a different server with more capacity, allowing production to start back up the next day. Toyota apologized to customers and suppliers for the inconvenience and plans to review the company's maintenance procedures to make sure that it doesn't happen again. It's odd and maybe a little troubling that the second largest car maker in the world can be taken down by the OG of computer errors. Jeff, now I was probably more shocked that Toyota actually came out and said, hey, this is the issue. But do you think maybe they were trying to get ahead of people that were just expecting it to be a sort of ransomware or hack situation?
Oh, 100%. I mean, and if what they're saying is true, I'm going to go with that premise. I'm going to go with that.
But what do they have to lie about, Jeff?
Well, we'll see about that. I'm going to go on the premise if what they're saying is true. I mean, you can see how this could shut things down. We speculated some of the supply chain issues that could be created, but really, if you start running a data-focused organization like this, even if they would have had the parts and supplies on hand, they did not have the information they needed to track everything through the production process to make it happen so that they could be set up not just for this day, but down the road. You could definitely see how this could screw things up if it was something as simple as they ran out of space in their server. You can connect the dots here. You would think somebody like Toyota would have so many contingencies in place that this is hard to imagine.
Yeah, like a backup server farm.
Well, the one thing I'll say, and I'll just play devil's advocate for Toyota here, what you can see is we've seen a push in manufacturing to have more legacy information historically categorized and kept on file and all this. These were things that for a while just weren't necessarily tracked and placed and kept on file, if you will. So now if we're doing more of that, which is a good thing, collecting more and more data to make better decisions going forward, to be more predictive and maybe in maintenance procedures, to do better forecasting for purchasing, you can see how there would be this super influx of data potentially that would create these issues, especially if you're dealing with cloud servers or things that are offsite. I don't know exactly about the IT network of these particular facilities in Japan, but you could sort of see how this evolution of Industry 4.0 and all these new technologies, more data coming into one place, it could create a situation like this and could potentially stop production. I mean, all of the pieces sort of fit together for this story if we're going to buy it for right now. I'll set Anna up that way.
But I mean, so if my personal device can give me a personal dashboard that says, stop taking photos of your kids because you're running out of space, they have to have some sort of intelligent dashboard to let them know, like, hey, FYI, just a heads up, running out of room.
Yeah.
Right, Anna?
Yeah. You would think. I mean, we talked about this last week when we discussed the original story, which is why are 14 plants beholden to this one system, and it has the capacity to. And then so you think, like, what are the checks and balances in place if they didn't have any warning about this, and then it's just like it's this one glitch going to shut down the entire. That's like a third of their production globally. Just seems like maybe a big miss. But you do wonder too, like in Japan, where they have the same workforce issues as we do, possibly worse. They have an aging population. They have negative population growth. Maybe there aren't enough people there. Maybe they're losing some legacy people that the guy who does this, I don't know.
The guy who pushes the save button was
you got.
So you're saying there's a former Toyota employee out there somewhere saying, like, I told him during my exit interview, this was going to be a problem, but they didn't listen to me.
We're going to run out of space. And no one listened. I don't know. My favorite take on this scenario was on the Truth About Cars website. Do you guys ever read that website?
I do not.
It's kind of a fun website about auto. But anyway, they had a writer, Matthew Guy, who kind of called BS on the explanation, saying, quote, Toyota's statement goes on to say, we would like to report that we have identified the above as the true cause, which cynics would suggest is exactly what someone would say if they haven't actually identified the true cause at all. But he went on to add that what he calls the PR machine was being quick to ward off speculation that this was the work of bad actors, and saying again, which they had said initially, but saying again, we would like to also reaffirm that the system malfunction was not caused by a cyber attack. It is hard to know what really happened here. I mean, they obviously want to do what they can to make it sound, I don't know. I know the last thing anyone wants to admit to is a cyber attack. But even with a healthy dose of skepticism here, does a cyber attack make them look worse than this? Because like
good point.
Yeah.
I mean, the excuse, if this is an excuse, like, at least maybe they could preserve some semblance of competence by saying, like, look, somebody infiltrated our system. It's happening to everyone, all these major corporations. But saying that you ran out of disk space, that doesn't, like, I don't know, that doesn't create, like, confidence among your shareholders, which is probably the biggest deal to them right now, is, like, making sure that they're not going to lose money by looking stupid. But that really looks stupid.
No, this goes back to that story we did, I don't know, like 80 episodes ago, where it was like the last manufacturer of floppies. So like once he went down, Toyota's operation was in disrepair because they're like, we can't get our hands on enough floppies.
Yeah, we just have 15. And then once we fill them up, our production goes down. We can't get any more. I don't know. At least they still have their data, I guess. Probably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe.
We don't.
They did say they recovered all of that. It was just stored differently, so it wasn't accessible initially.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did see that. Well, and that was, so for me, again, if we're going to trust what they say, and credit to the writer who pulled this is the true reason out, like, they started the statement with, like, no offense or honestly, where, okay, the exact opposite is coming.
Right.
Or our favorite internally, you're doing a great job. But. Love that mustache. Let's just go back and say, again, they didn't have enough server space. And I kind of looked at the angle of that's why data centers are like springing up as fast, if not faster, than like Amazon fulfillment centers and other huge developments across the nation. As of January, the United States has more than 2,500 data centers just in the nation. The rapid growth of AI and other data-intensive technology, like the emerging self-driving cars, is going to continue to drive this like really strong data center demand. So I was looking at the CBR Group. They're a commercial real estate firm, and they were talking about how the worldwide shortage of available power is actually what's inhibiting the growth of the global data center market. There's just not enough juice to power these things yet. And large corporations are actually finding it harder and harder to find capacity just because of the low supply, there's construction delays and power challenges all impacting the market. So it's not just we need more storage capacity, it's we need the infrastructure to support it. And it might be intriguing to see how this demand for data centers combined with the infrastructure demands of an EV base might really tax the grid.
That's a great point. I'll fan both flames. There is, if you're looking at real-time data, that is a ton of stress.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is this does sync up with an attack that hit Japanese-based Seiko watches around the same time.
Seiko watches?
Seiko.
Oh,
Seiko,
okay.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
They were hit with a huge ransomware attack right around the same time that this happened. So if you really want to fan some of those conspiracy flames.
Jeff's not saying it, but he's saying it.
So like you're saying that internally there's maybe some competition between this like a professional hacker firm where someone was on Seiko, someone was on Toyota to see who could crack them first?
No, maybe they found a similar way of getting into both.
Okay. Well, we shall see the next time we hear about the real truth behind Toyota's like $350 million bad day.
Hey, by the way, sneakers came out in 1992.
Oh, I was a decade off. I mean,
just
sounds better.
Yeah,
it does
That
sound
seems
better.
better.
Yeah, 82 is. I mean,
because River Phoenix was in that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yeah, miss. Thank you, Anna. Could have done that offline, but it's good that we got to it now.
No, I don't think
like
I
10
could
years
have.
out.
No.
It's good. All right. Our next most popular story. Lockheed Martin's rocket flies nearly twice as far as current munitions. In a recent flight test at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, Lockheed Martin successfully demonstrated its next-gen extended-range guided multiple launch rocket system, also known as the ERGMLRS. The ERGMLRS, or the ERGM-LRS. The ERGMLRS. According to Jay Price, Vice President of Precision Fires at Lockheed Martin Missiles and Fire Control, the test demonstrates nearly double the range while maintaining the same precision. The rocket system was a success when it came to flight trajectory, extended range, and accuracy from launch to impact. The product also successfully integrated with the U.S. Army's HIMARS, or High Mobility Artillery Rocket System Launcher. Yeah, the ERGMLRS worked really well with the HIMARS. The rocket pod also underwent stockpile to target sequence testing, or STS testing. This is really cool, actually, because I had never heard of this before, and it simulates the cumulative effect on the ERGMLRS, or the ERGM-LRS, is going to meet in the field between factory and launch for the life of the system, and it demonstrates durability of the missile and launch pod container. Jeff, I know that all of this is pretty cool in terms of the extended range while maintaining the precision, but it also shed light on an interesting process where they actually test kind of all the wear and tear that's going to go into transporting these munitions just to make sure everything is still in working order once they finally make it to the field.
No, good call. Like we were talking about before, with the security system, maybe not seeking out all those vulnerabilities before they put it out there.
Yeah.
Here they are seeing, well, what can go wrong just in the normal material handling type processes, I guess you could say, especially with the environments that these are going to potentially be used in. When you look at the range, I know I've said this about a lot of developments from a military perspective, but it is focused on being able to hit the target from further away. And that's in a direct response to the biggest threats we face right now, which is China and Russia. Mm-hmm. Things like that are going on. I think what is really interesting here is whenever you talk about range, even though it's going at like Mach 2.5 or whatever it is, extremely fast, anytime you back up that range, you do give the enemy more time to react. Yeah. So I think the bigger issue is that it's maintaining that accuracy, especially when we look at more urban warfare, tighter spaces, where you are, even though if it is a military action, and you are talking about like a 200-pound bomb here, you still want to try to avoid unintended consequences, if you will. So there is a lot of interesting development here. The fact that it can reach from that further out, I think, is more of a heads up to the enemy saying, look what we can do here.
Yeah.
Be careful. What's also interesting with these particular weapons have been in the news a lot because the Russians are claiming that they are shooting these down in Ukraine, which is not necessarily believable.
Yeah.
Because they are going, again, Mach 2 from 50 miles away right now. So it'll be interesting to see how this continues to develop. I think, again, this is one of these military sort of brags that's more like there's a lot more to be gained just in making the claim than if it actually comes to fruition in the way that it's used.
Yeah. Anna, this is great news for Lockheed, and maybe Lockheed could use a little bit of good news right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a win for Lockheed and the Army. Especially the emphasis on advancing this critical capability on a rapid timeline. Lockheed has had sort of a mixed bag of a week. The timing of this I thought was interesting because we saw this story hit the wire just like a day or two before it was revealed that Lockheed said that they're going to delay the much anticipated F-35 again.
Mm-hmm.
So the newest version of the F-35 reportedly won't be delivered until at least April, possibly even June, due to the hardware and software problems that are taking place. This is according to a public filing from Lockheed, who also added that the company expects to deliver 97 jets instead of what previously they had suggested would be up to 120. They're facing a ton of pressure right now on these, and the Air Force leaders are saying that the delays are actually reducing their ability to provide combatant commanders with combat aircraft that can tackle the toughest threats right now. Lieutenant General James Slife, the service's deputy chief of staff for operations, said getting these jets on time and fielded is absolutely critical to our ability to meet the global demand signal on a day-to-day basis, basically saying they were on a knife's edge of capacity every day.
Okay.
Military customers are no joke. This is really high stakes. I think Lockheed would love it if everyone would just focus on this next-gen extended range GMLRS.
Yeah. GMLRS.
GMLRS. Yeah. And not the F-35. But unfortunately, they have that to deal with right now. And that's going to be a bigger challenge. They probably would rather you just forget about that. But
yes, understanding that the F-35 is likely a higher ticket item.
mm-hmm.
This contract is still a big deal for Lockheed. In April, the U.S. Army awarded Lockheed a $4.79 billion contract to manufacture 2 full-rate production lots of these rockets and the associated equipment. Lockheed has a legacy of these manufacturing these rounds. They've made more than 60,000 GMLRS rounds. And one thing that I've got to say about Lockheed, a couple of other auto manufacturers and aerospace manufacturers, is that at the bottom, they always say where the work is taking place. So I know that Raytheon does a really good job. BAE typically does a really good job as well. And so I just wanted to point out that these systems are going to be produced at the company's Precision Fire Center of Excellence in Camden, Arkansas. So I think sometimes people see like big award. So they see the $4.8 billion. They see Lockheed Martin, and it's just like the rich getting richer. But, I like how Lockheed shows that these are going to impact everyone that's working in Camden, Arkansas. And I do think that sometimes that's lost on these stories, Jeff.
Well, and beyond that, I mean, the supply chain for these military suppliers is huge. I mean,
Right.
there's a number of other sub-vendors, or however you want to define them, that are also going to benefit greatly from these huge military contracts.
Right. Okay. Our most popular story this week, and it was a no-doubter. Tesla faces investigations over mysterious project. What is Project 42? The mysterious project. Tell us! The mysterious project has Tesla facing investigations by Manhattan federal prosecutors and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Back in July, the Wall Street Journal reported that Tesla board members were looking into a secretive project, which called for a structure with a glass-walled building to be built near the company's headquarters in Austin, Texas. According to people familiar with the matter, Project 42 was internally described as a house for CEO Elon Musk. Tesla employees were working on plans for Project 42 in 2022, but limited information has surfaced about the project. However, it has a twisted hexagonal design and a glass enclosure that seems to house a residential space with bathrooms, a kitchen, and bedrooms. The specialized glass was worth millions of dollars, and the order was flagged by Tesla's finance and internal audit groups. Few know if the glass was ever delivered, and the status of Project 42 remains shrouded in mystery. I mean, Jeff, maybe This was just like an Airbnb type situation for the employee of the month.
Hey, I would accept that. Like anything would be good.
Yeah.
I'm baffled by this. You know what? Here's a new koozie t-shirt contest. If anyone can actually send in a good reason why you would need to have this mysterious Project 42 as part of the new headquarters here, help me understand this. Because I don't get why a guy who's worth $258 billion needs to try to hide like employee housing or his house within the confines of the budget for a new headquarters.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we doing here? Like, this just baffles me. I am open to any argument, anything you can think up, David.
Yeah.
I'll accept it as a good reason.
Well,
because
I mean, maybe. And if you're going exotic glass structures, don't you hide it in SpaceX? You know?
Something.
Say like, no. We were going to send the hexagonal glass staircase to Mars because it's the only thing that will prevent static, which could cause explosions.
Something. I mean, companies hide funding for different stuff all the time. I mean, there's a way to get this through without it being so suspicious and drawing speculation. I mean, his board is his people, but he's definitely been called out before. And I mean, this is potentially like embezzlement or misappropriation of funds. I mean, this is, if you wanted to take it to that extreme, if somebody's looking to, they could.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how stupid things happen within companies. I mean, this has nothing to do with building an electric car.
Yeah.
And this is what you're going to get investigated for.
Yeah.
I mean, is this just him, flipping the bird to the SEC again? Like, is this just some sort of territory war there again? I can't understand this one at all.
Yeah. I mean, Anna, maybe it's that he has skated on hubris before, and he's just like, no. We'll call it Project 42. No one's going to know what it is.
I mean, yes, that's my guess. I mean, that's how same, Jeff. I mean, like you lose the right to just spend money indiscriminately when you're a publicly traded company. Yeah. Like, but Elon Musk knows that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
he's familiar with an investigation or
he
two.
does know. And he's got so much money, as you said, he can afford to build a house no matter how nice it is. He can afford to, no matter how specialized the glass is. Like, so I don't understand why you would take the risk of breaking these rules, especially because, he's been under the watchful eye of the SEC for so long. I mean, people are watching him like a hawk, so it makes no sense to me. That was my first thought too, is this just hubris? Or maybe it's just easy enough to make this work by changing some verbiage or massaging the paperwork. I mean, perhaps maybe it is like lodging for factory visitors and buttering them up in much the same way you would wine and dine an investor. Yeah. I mean, that's legal, right? So but anyway.
Then you call the project Tesla Visitor Housing. You don't call it Project 42.
But even to your point, like putting it under SpaceX, that's a private company. You can get away with this stuff.
Right. You just would, you would have. I know it does make you wonder, like, what is he trying to prove? And maybe we're all misunderstanding what it is.
Yeah.
But anyway, maybe it's a showroom. Who knows? I mean, it could be.
Tell us, folks.
What? What is it? But my point is, like, either way, there's so much happening in the world of Tesla right now that this is not a needed distraction. That, like they have inquiries about their range, that they're under investigation by the federal government about range claims that people are saying are not accurate. Mm-hmm. The probe into the autopilot thing. Yeah. Like that is actually reportedly nearing completion by the NHTSA. So stay tuned for more information on that, probably soon. So screwing around with this glass building, it just makes me, it's like Jeff Bezos' clock in the desert. It just makes me think, like, have you lost your mind? Like there's just so much money around for people like this to play with, and they just have these weird ambitions. I don't understand it. Like he's gonna get sunk by this glass house.
Well, he's not gonna get sunk by it. And actually, one thing that I'm excited about is, he's not a kind of like brush it under the rug kind of guy. Like, I see this becoming his engineering department's new location. We're just like, no, this is the plan all along. This is the brain trust of Tesla. They deserve an all glass structure in Texas.
He'll come up with a way.
Oh yeah. It's part of the story too is that the U.S. Attorney's Office has sent subpoenas to multiple current and former Tesla employees One part that's really interesting about this story is that specifically the prosecutors want information about communications with Omad Afshar, who, according to his LinkedIn profile, holds a position as, quote, or held a position as, quote, office of the CEO of Tesla. And they did conduct an internal investigation, the results of which are unknown, but Tesla fired some employees connected to the probe, and Afshar also took a position at SpaceX. So it does seem like maybe they're trying to brush it under the rug a little bit. It doesn't look good. You know what? The optics are really bad on this one, Jeff.
Especially for a glass house.
Well,
The guy who like loves to throw stones. Like, what are the irony of that?
oh man, not applicable. What is this comment? The user not applicable who's watching us live. Thank you very much. Not applicable. Can we just call you NA for short? We're getting to know each other. The meaning of life. HGG. Oh, gotcha. High-grade glioma radiation therapy on a high-field 1.5 Tesla MR workflow of it. The study of that? Oh, the glass house is possibly used for? Oh, we maybe think so. Okay. Yeah, let's see if we can get a little bit more context from NA, and then I'll stumble through their comment. All right. But before we get to, in case you missed it, the stories that maybe weren't as popular on the websites, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward, we have another word, the same word, from our sponsor, SIGA Technologies. This week's episode is brought to you by SIGA Technologies. While it has always been at the forefront, more manufacturers are giving even more attention to how maintenance programs can drive greater efficiency and productivity. Register now to watch Jeff's new interview with Stephen Timms, SIGA CEO, to hear how manufacturers are increasing tool time 2 hours per day per technician. Now on to, in case you missed it, the stories that maybe weren't as popular, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. I'll go first this week. I had a story that kind of popped on the websites, and it made sense to me why it kind of popped, because it takes a really old thing that lasted forever, and they fixed it in a really unique way. So the headline for the story was Revitalizing a 99-year-old Hydropower Turbine. This hydropower plant in West Java, Indonesia, was originally built in the 1920s. It supplies electricity to the local community and the wider grid, but it doesn't have a backup system. So if it goes down, the area has to pull in energy from other sources, and it kind of really taxes the local infrastructure. After almost a century in operation, the support bolts installed on one of the turbine shafts failed and caused the turbine to run uncontrolled.
Yeah.
The turbine shaft split completely in two, smashing the casing to pieces while damaging the turbine tips, runner casings, and the bearing pedestal. The result was a complete failure. So they called in Sulzer, I believe Sulzer, Indonesia, to perform the complex repairs and upgrades, and was able to have everything back online in 5 months, less than half of the expected 12-month lead time, in the event that they were sourcing all new equipment. Now, how did they do it? Well, Sulzer got creative. To repair the broken shaft, they sourced a smaller diameter shaft locally and built it up to the correct size. This process has been used by Sulzer Indonesia since 2002, and it enables rotors to be weld repaired instead of being scrapped. The damaged turbine tips also needed to be repaired. Sulzer used laser scans and reverse engineering techniques to figure out the as-new dimensions. Then, specialist welding processes were used to clad the blade tips with corrosion-resistant material. The new shaft and repaired turbine were then reassembled. A replacement sleeve was also manufactured and fitted. And another challenging aspect of the repair was the smashed casing. Taking scans and dimensions collected during the inspection, Sulzer reversed engineered the elbow casing as well. The turbine is now expected to operate reliably for at least another 30 years. And I picked this because it was a really cool story of how, they just don't make them like they used to, right? Like a 100-year-old hydropower turbine lasted 100 years. And that just takes a moment to be like, you know what? great work. Whoever the engineering team behind that, you just really crushed it. But, you know, when it goes down and there is a critical need for power, this company was able to kind of get it back up and running in less than half of the time that it was expected with some like truly unique welding techniques. And this continues to do well on the website. Not enough to get into the top 5, but I just really thought it was a cool application, something that we don't see all the time. But, you know, Jeff, sometimes when I hear like, we sometimes cover those stories, right? Where they make fixes just like this. And unless everything is done perfectly, maybe those 30 years might be optimistic. But hey, let's go glasses half full on this one.
Yeah, I think it's cool to see reverse engineering for good for once. Usually we see people doing that as a way to break into something, wreck something, copy something, steal something, whatever you want to say. So it was cool to see the extent that it was utilized and using some of the software and everything else too to really get in there. It was very interesting to read that. The thing that I think I could take away too from the 30-year projected expanded lifetime is there's some predictive and preventative maintenance elements that can also be incorporated in there, so we don't have to have things break down completely next time before we can get a fix in there.
Yeah, well, and I get it, Anna. Like it's worked it's worked well, reliably for 100 years. I mean, I guess I don't know when you do pull in preventative or predictive maintenance, but it's like I don't even know how you get started with that. Just like, well, you probably should be fine for another 100, right?
Yeah, I know, and it makes you think of that knowledge transfer of all the people who work on this equipment over time. And then, that topic came to mind too when I was reading this story, and they were talking about how Sulzer was able to solve this problem because they have engineering expertise to fix like multiple different equipment providers and brand familiarity. But also they talked about their world-class welding capabilities and their in-depth technical expertise that was required to repair this legacy equipment. And a lot of legacy skills, especially in welding, are kind of disappearing right now. So you have to think about, like, does your organization have a depth of bench to be able to solve some of these complex problems on these older equipment? I mean, that's kind of weird to think about, but all the factories out there that have machining centers that are decades old and stuff like that, like there's a lot of really old equipment still out that's in use today. And you wonder, like, how effective would that be to try to maintain that for 30 more years if you had to? Agreed.
And while engineers and maintenance professionals like a challenge, if you're working with equipment that is maybe one of one, this was an opportunity, and maybe still provides an opportunity where, hey, now that you have all the reverse engineered specs, maybe make one of each just to have in the back in case she goes down again. But either way, a really cool story. And I mean, hey, the community has reliable power once again. Jeff, what's your in case you missed it this week?
All right, I picked a story, and when I saw the headline, I really wanted to read it because I really hoped there was more to it than what I was seeing. But the headline is the government's eager to restore powers to keep dangerous chemicals out of extremists' hands. This doesn't seem like something we should have to go into a lot of details about, on the very surface of it. And there's really not a lot more to it than that, unfortunately. So the government, more specifically the Department of Homeland Security, is worried about the safety of chemical facilities across the country after its power to keep dangerous substances out of the hands of extremists lapsed about a month ago. So basically, DHS has the ability right now to inspect, or they did, I should say, had the ability to inspect facilities where chemicals are being used or stored to make sure security systems are in place, up to snuff. The facilities themselves have been required to also vet prospective employees for any terrorism links. The problem is this program, which is called the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards, just by that name.
Yeah.
Like, this should be a legacy thing.
Top of the list.
This should not need any type of legislative action to reenact, to reinforce, to keep it going. Like, come on.
Green
what
light
are we doing here?
Yeah.
But somehow, this expired July 28th after Congress failed to renew it. Homeland Security officials say if left, this is going to create gaping holes in the country's national security, and they're calling on Congress to act quickly when it returns this week.
Let's get it done.
The only person who has spoken out against this, now we've got people from the American Chemical Council who are saying, we need this. DHS is saying, we need this. Jen Easterly, who is the cybersecurity and security consultant for the White House and everything else, she's saying, we need this. Rand Paul, the Republican senator from Kentucky, is going, hey, wait a minute, let's pump the brakes on this, because are we sure there's not somebody else who's also doing this? Is this some sort of duplicative effort by the government? Is this some sort of waste in here? Wouldn't companies do this anyways, David, even if we didn't have some sort of legislative power in place?
Yeah, the greater good. They're gonna do the best they can.
This is ridiculous. This is where I get so frustrated with government oversight, because you've got somebody in the government saying, we need to do this.
Yeah.
In the meantime, they've basically taken a lot of these responsibilities and the individuals who are working with DHS in this capacity to a volunteer organization. So they're still doing this stuff, but it's a voluntary compliance dynamic. So these companies, the distributors, the American manufacturers, they're not obligated to perform these security checks. They're not obligated to validate they have all these security precautions in place. They're not obligated to vet their employees to make sure they don't pose a threat to national security. Do I really have to say why this might be a problem, or why this may be a critical issue if we don't get this resolved going forward?
Yeah.
I mean, this one just blew my mind, because I figured there had to be more to it than this. And it's just as simple as Congress didn't move, and then you've got one senator who's going, well, I don't think we need to do this. This one just seems so common sense to me. I don't understand, especially when you've got, within the article, there was one big distributor who's like saying, we need to do this.
Yeah.
There's two people within government saying, we need to do this. And there's an organization within the industry saying, we need to do this and have this in place.
Yeah.
Hopefully this week, Congress will realize this is a no-brainer and get the chemical facility anti-terrorism standards back in action.
So there are 300 chemicals on this list. And I don't know if you shared this number, Jeff, but there are 3,200 high-risk facilities just in the United States. So when you get, it's just weird when you get people in the industry, in the government, and outside kind of coming together to be like, hey, this one was important. Yeah. But I mean, Anna, as we've seen, the history of self-regulation in industry pretty much has a flawless track record.
Right. It always works.
It always works.
I mean, I do think that there's probably going to be, companies out there, and maybe they're vocal in speaking to their local legislators about not wanting the regulation of it. I mean, it says that the regulations apply not just to the chemical manufacturers and distributors, but also facilities that use the chemicals in certain quantities, agriculture, plastics, pharmaceuticals. I agree that this is an imperative and it needs to be done, but I can also see how it might have happened that somebody drags their feet to make it look like they're the lone holdout on the regulation.
He's a maverick.
Yeah. I mean, it's just politicking, but it's like, just so like antithetical towards the greater good. It's just disgusting.
Well, it gets me too, because we talk about all this visibility in the supply chain, and that's really what this is. It's just understanding where everything's going and who's got their hands on them.
Yeah.
It's just that simple and straightforward.
I just see the list of things expiring coming across like every aides desk, and they read like the chemical facility anti-terrorism standards, and they're like, whoa, what's that one? What's that one? I think, you know what? Don't everybody leave yet. We should get to this one. Anyway, it is, hopefully something has to be done this week.
Basically, Congress is out for most of the month, but they are back this week. So hopefully they can actually sit down, get this reenacted, get DHS back up and running on this program, because otherwise this lapse, again, you're going to have potentially individuals who get hired that we're not doing background checks on that could be up to no good.
I just don't understand how I need my ID scanned when I buy NyQuil, but something like this can lapse, Yeah. All right. Well, Anna, before we get to you, in case you missed it, it looks like we may have been played a little bit by the people in the comments section. So apologies on what we were trying to read from Not Applicable. So, Anna, what is your... Oh, wait. Not applicable. Okay, now says that 42 is the answer to the meaning of life. Oh, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Gotcha. Thank you, not applicable.
That's where the koozie.
That's where the koozie.
Sorry for mischaracterizing your intent.
There are just a lot of things happening over the course of a live podcast, and just it's hard to wrangle them all.
That's true.
Anna, what's your in case you missed it this week?
So the story I selected was titled "Tennis Grapples with Fuzzy Yellow Recycling Problem."
Mm-hmm.
That, of course, gets your attention.
Of course it does.
You don't often see the word fuzzy in a headline, so I was like, this story sounds adorable. But it's not.
Oh, I like how you spun it there.
Yeah.
It's like the best movie trailer. Fuzzy tennis balls are killing the planet.
We gotta cancel tennis.
Well, maybe. No. No, I like playing tennis. I'm not a great tennis player, but I've played it my whole life, and I didn't realize that tennis balls are apparently extremely hard to recycle. So the story is about how the industry has yet to develop a ball to make that easier, and that nearly all of the 330 million balls made worldwide each year eventually get chucked in the garbage, most often ending in landfills where they can take more than 400 years to decompose.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right? So at issue is the tennis ball's design, which has been substantially unchanged since it was invented in the 1920s. It consists of a felt covering. We know the felt covering, the fuzzy part, glued to a hollow air-filled rubber core. The biggest barrier to recycling the rubber in the ball is the difficulty of removing the felt from the core because of the tight glue that's designed to hold that cover on. And then, that's how it survives being thwacked by a racket. But the felt is also a problem, right? So they say a blended combination of wool and nylon is what comprises that felt, and it cannot be recycled. So I highlighted this story because I have never heard of this, nor have I considered it. And some of the experts in the article make a point of saying that we should not cancel tennis. So this is like a drop in the bucket. A blip on the radar, I think somebody said, which is fair. But that is a road that I really hate going down when we talk about this stuff. Because of the whataboutisms. Like we saw this with the straw stuff. Do you remember the straw stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's like, quit canceling straws.
Yeah, it's about reducing single-use plastic streams.
We have bigger fish to fry. Why are we worried about straws, but not this? But I think the answer is that we can worry about all of it simultaneously. Because the problem is not just going after plastic shopping bags, just as much as it's not solved by going after just automotive, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to be a lot of big things, and I think even more little things that move the needle, and lots of things might change in our lives. And I think we just have to get over our nostalgia, and we just have to the ITF, which is the International Tennis Foundation, they're actually looking into whether they can replace the balls less during competition, if they can reuse them when possible. They're even looking at repressurizing tennis balls. Okay. My point here is let them. Yeah. Right? Yeah. I mean, I think it all helps, and it annoys people, it annoys industries at the but I think the more that we think about the impacts of our choices as individuals and as organizations, I think the more progress we make. And so it's just one of those things, we gotta, we have to stop being offended and angry every time somebody puts this stuff out there. We had a lot of that. Are you serious? This is 0.0007% of the waste stream. But it's about all of them. Well, it's about all of it. And, you hear a lot it's, the pollution comes from factories. The only people that can do anything about this on a large scale are businesses, the government, and individuals are responsible for so little. But if you think about it that way, then no one changes anything about their behavior. And in reality, if all of us did, then we are responsible for a lot of it, right? So I think everyone needs to work together and kind of look at these as they come and try to do better. I don't think we have to look at this and be mad that anyone brought it up.
No, agreed. And first of all, compliments on thwacked. Bringing that into a podcast episode.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Thwack.
I didn't know. Is that the appropriate, a tennis ball is not struck or hit, it is thwacked?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. I just didn't know, as,
now.
Yeah, as armchair tennis pro.
armchair.
I was learning new lingo. And I do wait for when the new design comes out for the tennis ball, because now that this is out there, it's obvious that people are going to work on it, and then they're going to test new designs, and then there's going to be the outcry from the pros that are just like, you can't repressurize a ball. It's completely different, or like a new design that's recyclable, and they're just like, the ball thwacks differently. And, the other thing is that there are so many of the of these balls just being thrown away. If they want to ship them to my house,
I was gonna say Humane Society, right?
Yeah, there could be a way. Like, I understand that it's all about they'll still enter the waste stream, but they could be used in so many different applications, even for like upcycled dog toys, until my dog chews them into oblivion, and I need to use another of the 300 million?
300 million. And that's exactly why when this stuff comes up, you just need to talk about it in a constructive way, not like get all bristly about it. Like,
you throw that in the garbage where it belongs. Don't do anything else with it. How dare you disturb the sanctity of the U.S. Open?
For those listening and not watching, Anna just had like an allergic reaction, right?
Oh, yeah.
Just talking about it.
You were fully embodying the person you're thinking about right now. Just like, not in my backyard. Tennis stays the way it's always been.
Tennis will never change.
Yeah. Jeff, were you aware, that the tennis ball was so unrecyclable?
No clue, but I agree with everything you guys have been saying. Every little bit helps. If we can do something a little better, why don't you? Cleaner is always better.
Yeah.
Forget any of the other environmental. If you don't want to, go that route with it, cleaner is better. And the cleaner we have things, the better everything works. It's that simple.
Is it as simple? Can I just send an email to the U.S. Open and be like, hey, send one of those cases to me?
So I read that in the article, it was talking about one of the more recent tournaments, and they went through 100,000 balls just in that one tournament.
Don't think of it just like a school, hopefully.
Because they replace them after every 9 points or something. It's very fast.
One is also in the U.S. Open, you think of, you traditionally buy a tennis ball in the canister of 3. And there is at least the metal top and the plastic canister are recyclable. But for the U.S. Open in particular, they're each individually packaged. So, it's also a lot of packaging waste as well, but at least is recyclable. All right, well, let's move on to our final thoughts before we get out of here this week. Anna, what's your final thought?
We had a successful first week of school my twins started end of last week, and my older daughter started this week, and she got on the bus, and now she loves the bus, and I asked her if I could ride it with her, and she said no. So that's a good news. I think she's she's ready to fly. She's having a great time. So
my daughters don't let me go anywhere with them either. Yeah, so she's there already.
I guess.
No, it's I feel like when school starts, and so my final thought is actually kindergarten related as well. Des went to kindergarten for the first time yesterday and just crushed it between yesterday and today. He was confident and he was fearless, and I you never know how your kid is going to respond to something new, just because they respond differently to all different types of situations. And I'm just very proud of how he handled everything, and he continues to amaze me. And a little bit to the point about just going back to school in general, I think that everybody thinks that, okay, everyone's back to school and it should be easier for everybody that's in the workforce. But we also have to remember the logistics around getting kids to and from school, the fact that schools end at crazy times like 2:56 in the afternoon, and that is not when the workday ends. And so there are all kinds of logistical nightmares, new logistical nightmares that families across America are going through right now. Just be patient, right? Just be patient. And the fact that there's also no bus drivers right now in America. So in the event that you are getting ready to retire, let me talk about my grandpa's second career as a bus driver. And he loves it, he loved it, the connection with the kids. So in the event that you're kind of just, sitting around doing that crossword, still got some keen eyesight and patience, lots of patience, consider going into being a bus driver.
And the CDL.
Well, it's easy to get that, easy enough. I think the patience and the eyesight are the two bigger ones. But no, just something to think about, especially as we have kind of critical needs in some of these areas. Jeff, before we get to your final thought, Ryan, who is watching us live, says IEN is the bee's knees.
Yes.
Darn right it is.
That's great. Apologies again to Non-Applicable for butchering the Hitchhiker's Guide reference. That's on me. I love that book. Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
First of all, do you guys know how much joy I get out of you experiencing these things that I was dealing with like 15 years ago? And I'd try to explain them to you and you'd just be like, what?
Yeah.
Huh?
You're like,
Oh, yeah.
We're like, we have a dog.
Yeah.
Do you know how much work
That's
is?
so
Yeah.
much work. Yeah, I
I
know.
had to brush my dog for 15 minutes, and the hair was everywhere, Jeff. It's about the same.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
but I'm enjoying this. This is good.
I know, and honestly, I enjoy your perspective because you constantly put the situation in perspective where it's just like, yeah, but enjoy it because all of a sudden it's over.
There's
So
that.
no, I do appreciate seeing it from the other side.
Interesting. So I was going to wait to bring up this book I'm reading, but with the whole thing with Elon Musk and Project 42 here, there's some interesting sort of relative dynamics, some things that are kind of similar. So I'm reading this book called The Atomic City Girls. Girls of Atomic City. I'm sorry. The Girls of Atomic City. And it's basically about these women during World War II who were part of this whole secret project down at the Oak Ridge Labs in Tennessee.
okay.
Basically, they were there and they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know exactly what they were working on, but it was all associated with the development of the atomic bomb.
Oof.
So these women were coming from all over the country. They were basically looking for typists. They were looking for people, the chemists, scientists, all these kind of things. And all they knew is they were looking at data or they were processing paperwork, and they really didn't know, and they were not allowed to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the U.S. Army created this huge community of like 60,000 people in where is now Oak Ridge Labs. Okay, that was sort of the antithesis of that. And they had to be in complete secrecy of what they were doing. They couldn't talk about anything that was going on down there. The saying, they had this sign that was outside the place, was, "What you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, when you leave here, let it stay here."
All right.
And in thinking about this, and the whole reason that everybody was so dedicated to doing this, and I mean, it was a community. They had softball leagues, they had a theater, they had a bunch of other things. It was a difficult living environment, but it was a community. But they were so united around the fact that this is going to win the war.
Okay.
They didn't know what they were doing exactly. They didn't really have an idea as to what they were working on. There were some women who would work in some of these factories. They were the largest factories in the world at the time, just basically turning knobs and just registering the data.
Yeah.
And basically what they were doing is they were enriching uranium. But they didn't know that's what it was.
Yeah.
They just called it the substance.
Yeah.
And it was all for the gadget.
Oh, my
So there's a
goodness.
lot of this stuff. And you just think
Man.
there is no way. There is absolutely no way this could happen today.
Yeah.
There's no way. So it was interesting. I was going to wait to talk about it, but then when you look at the Project 42 thing that Tesla is doing there,
Yeah.
this guy's just trying to build a house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've got the SEC
And he gets
involved
smoked out.
and
Yeah.
everything else.
Somebody takes footage of it
Yeah.
and puts it on
These
Instagram.
people were changing the world and did it in secrecy for 2 years in Tennessee.
Well, and kind of what we were talking about earlier, it's good to know, Anna, that at some point we will be able to have recreational reading back in our life more predominantly.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice that you can read books, Jeff, and have time to do that.
Wasn't always the case.
No, I have a nice stack of books that I plan to get to.
I wear my tutu everywhere, pretty much memorized.
Oh,
So,
all right.
you know,
Very good. We're deep in the napping house right now.
nice.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can talk to Ryan, you can talk to Non-Applicable, and you can actually understand what they're trying to convey to the podcast. All right, for Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I was going to say my name. I was going to say for Jeff Ranke and David Manchi, I'm Anna Wells. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we'll see you next week.